Alexander Pierce stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, absently adjusting his Patek. Philippe watched while observing the Manhattan skyline. The golden hour cast long shadows across the city, painting the glass facades of neighboring skyscrapers in amber hues. As CEO of Pierce Enterprises, one of the largest investment firms in the country, he was accustomed to handling billion-dollar deals with unwavering composure. Today was no different, or so he thought. The quarterly investors' meeting was proceeding smoothly via video conference, with projections exceeding expectations across all portfolios. Alexander was in the middle of presenting a particularly successful venture in renewable energy when his personal phone began to vibrate. He glanced at the screen, ready to dismiss the call, but his son Tommy's name made him pause. Tommy never called during school hours. Something twisted in his stomach. A foreign sensation for a man who prided himself on maintaining perfect control. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said to the grid of faces on his monitor. "I need to take this call. Jenkins will continue with the presentation." The moment he accepted the call, his carefully constructed world began to crumble. Tommy's voice came through small and frightened, nothing like the cheerful 8-year-old he'd spoken to last weekend. "Daddy?" The tremor in his son's voice sent ice through Alexander's veins. "I'm hungry. Mom's gone. She's been gone for 3 days. Alexander's grip tightened on his phone. "What do you mean, gone? She told me you were both going on vacation." "This month. I transferred the money for it." "We never went anywhere," Tommy whispered. "There was this new man she was seeing, and then she just disappeared. I'm scared, Dad. There's no food left and I don't know what to do." The prestigious office with its modern art and designer furniture suddenly felt suffocating. Alexander's mind raced through recent conversations with his ex-wife, Catherine. She had seemed distracted lately, asking for additional funds for various reasons: home repairs, school activities, the supposed vacation. He had transferred the money without question, believing it was the extent of his parental responsibility. "Stay where you are, buddy. I'm coming to get you right now." Alexander was already moving, grabbing his jacket from the custom Italian leather chair. "Have you called anyone else?" "No," Tommy's voice cracked. "Mom said we shouldn't trust anyone." "But you're my dad. I had to call you." The simple faith in his son's voice hit Alexander like a physical blow. He had always considered himself a good father, providing financial security, paying for the best schools, sending generous child support. But now, hearing the fear in Tommy's voice, he realized money alone didn't make a father. "Listen to me carefully, Tommy. Go to your room and pack a small bag with clothes. I'll be there in 3 hours. Don't open the door for anyone else." Alexander was already texting his pilot to prepare the private jet. "Can you stay on the phone with me?" "The battery is almost dead," Tommy said, his voice getting fainter. "Please hurry, Dad." "I will, son. I promise." Alexander had never meant anything more in his life. "I'll call you on the landline in 5 minutes. Don't be scared." As he rushed toward the elevator, Alexander's mind was racing. Catherine had always been responsible, devoted to Tommy. Something was terribly wrong. The confident CEO facade cracked, revealing a terrified father beneath. His son was alone, hungry and frightened, while he had been focused on closing deals and growing his empire. The 3-hour journey to Boston stretched before him like an eternity. For the first time in years, Alexander Pierce, the man who could buy anything he wanted, felt completely helpless. His wealth, his connections, his power. None of it could make his private jet fly faster or erase the fear in his son's voice. What he didn't know yet was that this day would mark the beginning of a journey that would transform not only his life, but the lives of countless others. The universe had chosen this moment to teach one of its most powerful lessons. Sometimes, the biggest wake-up calls come through the smallest voices. The luxury high-rise apartment building in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood had always impressed Alexander with its elegant architecture and prestigious address. Now, as he strode through the marble lobby, none of that mattered. His designer shoes echoed against the polished floor as he rushed toward the private elevator, security staff stepping aside at his authoritative gesture. The ride to the 15th floor felt interminable. Alexander had maintained contact with Tommy through the landline during his flight, but the boy's responses had grown increasingly distant and lethargic. The normally articulate child had trouble forming complete sentences, and Alexander's concern had morphed into full-blown panic. When the elevator doors finally opened, Alexander nearly ran down the hallway. Using his emergency key, the one Catherine had given him years ago for medical emergencies, he burst into the apartment and felt his world tilt on its axis. The place was unrecognizable. Gone was the immaculate home he remembered from his last visit 6 months ago. The air was stale, heavy with neglect. Dishes were piled in the sink, mail scattered across the floor. A half-empty glass of water sat on the coffee table, a fine layer of dust settling on its surface. "Tommy!" Alexander called out, his voice echoing through the eerily quiet space. "Where are you, son?" A small movement from the direction of the bedrooms caught his attention. Tommy emerged slowly, looking so different from the vibrant boy Alexander remembered that his heart clenched painfully in his chest. His son's face was pale, his clothes wrinkled and unchanged for what looked like days. Dark circles shadowed his young eyes, making him appear haunted. "Daddy?" Tommy's voice was barely above a whisper. He swayed slightly where he stood. Alexander crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees to embrace his son. Tommy felt too light, too fragile in his arms. The boy's body trembled as he buried his face in his father's expensive suit jacket. "When did you last eat, buddy?" Alexander asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the rage and guilt churning inside him. "I don't know," Tommy mumbled. "There were some crackers, but they're gone now. Mom usually makes sure we have food, but she's been acting weird since David started coming around." "David?" Alexander pulled back slightly, looking into his son's eyes. "Is that the man your mother was seeing?" Tommy nodded, his lower lip trembling. "He said he was a financial person like you. Mom started giving him money to invest. She said he was going to make us rich." The boy's voice dropped even lower. "But then she started crying a lot when she thought I couldn't hear. And she wouldn't let me call Grandma anymore." Alexander's jaw clenched. He had noticed the recent requests for additional money, but had attributed them to inflation and Tommy's growing needs. How could he have been so blind? He prided himself on being able to read people, to spot financial schemes from miles away. Yet he had missed the signs right in front of him. "Let's get you something to eat," Alexander said, standing up and lifting Tommy into his arms. The boy's head rested heavily on his shoulder, a clear sign of exhaustion. "Then we'll figure this out together." In the kitchen, the refrigerator held nothing but a half-empty bottle of expired milk and some moldy cheese. The pantry was equally bare, save for a few canned goods pushed to the back. Alexander's hands shook as he pulled out his phone to order food delivery. While they waited, he explored the apartment more thoroughly, with Tommy never leaving his side. In Catherine's home office, he found stacks of financial documents, investment proposals, and bank statements. Something caught his eye: a series of large transfers to an account he didn't recognize, dated over the past few months. "Did your mom ever talk about where she and David were investing the money?" Alexander asked carefully, trying to keep his tone light despite the growing dread in his stomach. Tommy shrugged, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "She said it was a secret project, that we couldn't tell anyone about it because other people would try to steal our opportunity." He looked up at his father, eyes filling with tears. "Did I do something wrong by telling you?" Alexander pulled his son close, his heart breaking at the question. "No, Tommy. You did exactly the right thing by calling me. You're so brave and I'm so proud of you." He kissed the top of his son's head, making a silent vow. He would make this right not just for Tommy and Catherine, but for anyone else who might be vulnerable to such manipulation. What Alexander didn't realize yet was that this was just the beginning. The truth about David and the web of deception he had woven would prove to be far more intricate than anyone could have imagined. As the food delivery arrived, and he watched his son eat his first proper meal in days, Alexander Pierce, the man who had built an empire on calculated decisions and emotional distance, felt something fundamental shift inside him. Money could buy many things, but it couldn't replace the time he should have spent truly being present in his son's life. The sun was setting over Boston Harbor, casting long shadows across the city. In a luxurious apartment that had become a prison of secrets, a father and son began the first steps of their journey toward healing, not just their own family, but countless others who would eventually be touched by the changes this day would bring. The first rays of morning light filtered through the hotel suite's windows, finding Alexander seated in a plush armchair, his laptop balanced precariously on his knees. He hadn't slept, spending the night making calls and analyzing the financial documents he'd photographed in Catherine's apartment. Tommy slept peacefully in the adjacent room, the first real rest he'd had in days. Alexander rubbed his tired eyes, the numbers on the screen beginning to blur. The pattern he was seeing made his blood run cold. The transfers from Catherine's account weren't just random withdrawals. They were calculated, systematic drains of her resources. Every time he had sent child support or additional funds, a significant portion had been diverted within days to various offshore accounts. His phone buzzed with a message from his private investigator, Marcus Chen. Found something. David Reynolds isn't who he claims to be. Real name, Daniel Reeves. Multiple aliases. Pattern of targeting wealthy divorcees. Need to meet ASAP. Alexander's jaw clenched. He glanced at the bedroom door where Tommy slept, remembering his son's pale face and trembling hands. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about his family, about the son he had failed to protect. A soft knock at the suite's door pulled him from his thoughts. Sarah Martinez, his most trusted executive assistant, entered quietly, carrying a stack of files and a fresh cup of coffee. "I've compiled everything we could find on Daniel Reeves," she said, placing the files on the coffee table. "It's disturbing, Mr. Pierce. He's sophisticated, methodical. He presents himself as a financial consultant specializing in alternative investments. Gets close to his targets through charity events and high-end social clubs." Alexander flipped through the files, his frown deepening. Photos showed a handsome man in his 40s, impeccably dressed, always surrounded by influential people. How does he gain their trust so completely? Sarah hesitated. He's brilliant at emotional manipulation. He studies his targets extensively, learning their vulnerabilities. With Catherine, she paused, choosing her words carefully. He seems to have exploited her desire to prove herself financially independent after the divorce. The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He remembered the arguments during their separation, Catherine's accusations that he treated her like a child when it came to money. Had his own actions, his controlling approach to their finances during their marriage, made her vulnerable to someone like Reeves? A small sound from the bedroom doorway made them both turn. Tommy stood there in his oversized hotel pajamas, looking uncertain. "Dad, are you talking about David?" Alexander quickly closed the files. "Come here, buddy." He opened his arms, and Tommy climbed into his lap, something he hadn't done in years. "We're going to find Mom, I promise, but I need you to tell me everything you remember about David. Even small things might help." Tommy's fingers played with his father's silk tie, a nervous habit from when he was younger. "He was nice at first, brought me expensive toys, but then he started coming over more, and Mum started acting weird. She'd lock herself in her office when he was there. Sometimes I heard her crying. Did you ever see him take anything from the apartment? Papers maybe, or Mum's phone?" Tommy's brow furrowed in concentration. "He had this special phone, like he carried two, and he made Mom download some app on hers, said it was for secure investment communications or something." Sarah was already typing on her tablet. "That could be important. The cybersecurity team might be able to trace it." "There's something else," Tommy said quietly. "The day before Mom disappeared, I heard them fighting about some papers she wouldn't sign. David said she was ruining everything, that she needed to trust him. Mom said she wanted to talk to her lawyer first." Alexander exchanged a significant look with Sarah. This could be why Catherine had vanished. She had finally started to question Reeves's schemes. "Mr. Pierce," Sarah said, her voice professional but urgent, "the investigator just sent another update. They found a pattern. In each previous case, when the target started asking questions, they would suddenly experience episodes, become confused, disoriented, end up in hospitals with unexplained symptoms. Alexander felt Tommy stiffen in his arms. He kept his voice calm, steady. "Sarah, get our medical team on standby and contact Boston General. Have them check their recent admissions. Tommy, how about some breakfast? We can have anything you want." As Sarah left to make arrangements, Alexander held his son closer. The morning sun painted patterns on the hotel room floor, a deceptively peaceful scene. Outside these walls, somewhere in the city, Catherine was in danger. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Pierce was facing a problem that couldn't be solved with money alone. He thought about the empire he'd built, the deals he'd closed, the billions he'd earned. None of it meant anything compared to the weight of his son in his arms and the knowledge that his ex-wife, the mother of his child, needed him. Not his money, not his influence, but him. Tommy's small voice broke into his thoughts. "Dad, we're going to help Mum, right? And maybe help other people too. So no other kids have to be scared like this." Alexander looked down at his son's earnest face, seeing wisdom beyond his years in those young eyes. In that moment, a seed was planted, an idea that would eventually grow into something far bigger than himself. But first, they had to find Catherine. The private waiting room at Boston General Hospital felt like a cage to Alexander. He paced the expensive carpet, his Italian leather shoes wearing an invisible path as he waited for news. They had found Catherine, alive but unresponsive, in a small motel on the outskirts of the city. The doctors were running tests, trying to determine what substances were in her system. Tommy sat curled in a large armchair, sketching in a notebook Sarah had bought him. Art had always been his escape, and now his pencil moved across the paper, creating intricate patterns that seemed to reflect his troubled thoughts. Alexander watched his son, noting how the boy's drawings had changed from the bright, cheerful scenes he used to create to these complex, maze-like designs. "Mr. Pierce." Dr. Elena Rodriguez entered the room, her face carefully neutral. "We have some preliminary results. Your ex-wife appears to have been systematically drugged with a combination of substances that induced confusion and compliance. It's sophisticated, designed to make the victim appear unstable while remaining technically functional." Alexander's hands clenched into fists. "Will she recover?" "With proper treatment, yes. But Mr. Pierce..." Dr. Rodriguez lowered her voice, glancing at Tommy. "We've seen 3 similar cases in the past month, all women, all from affluent backgrounds. None of them remembered exactly what happened to them." Before Alexander could respond, Marcus Chen slipped into the room. The private investigator's usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, suggesting he'd been working through the night. "We found Reeves's laptop," Marcus said without preamble. "He was sloppy when he ran. Left it in the motel room. The encryption's tough, but our tech team is working on it. There's something else, though." He pulled out his phone, showing Alexander a series of photographs. These were in a hidden compartment in his motel room. Different women, different cities, all with the same story. Alexander studied the photos, his stomach churning. Each image showed Reeves with a different woman at charity events, investment seminars, exclusive clubs. The settings changed, but his predatory smile remained constant. "Dad?" Tommy's voice made both men turn. The boy had abandoned his drawing and was standing near them, his young face serious. "Is Mum going to be okay?" Alexander knelt down to his son's level. "She's going to be fine, buddy. The doctors are helping her get better. In fact..." He glanced at Dr. Rodriguez, who nodded encouragingly. "Would you like to see her? She's sleeping right now, but I know she'd love to know you're here." Tommy nodded, clutching his sketchbook to his chest like a shield. As they walked down the hospital corridor, Alexander noticed how his son's shoulders straightened, how he seemed to be gathering his strength. When had this little boy become so brave? Catherine's room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. She looked small in the hospital bed, her usual vibrancy dimmed but not extinguished. Tommy approached slowly, placing his latest drawing on her bedside table, a complex pattern that somehow contained hope within its intricate lines. "I made this for you, Mom," he whispered, even though she couldn't hear him. It's like a map to help you find your way back. Alexander felt something crack inside his chest. He had spent years building walls around his emotions, treating relationships like business transactions. Now, watching his son's simple act of love, those walls began to crumble. Sarah appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Mr. Pierce, the tech team has broken through the first layer of encryption on Reeves's laptop. It's extensive. He's been running this scheme for years, targeting women across multiple states. The financial manipulation was just the beginning. He was building a network, using each victim's social connections to find his next target." Alexander looked at Catherine's peaceful face, then at Tommy's hopeful one. A plan was forming in his mind, not just to bring Reeves to justice, but to create something lasting from this pain. "Sarah, contact our legal team. I want to set up a foundation, something to help women and children affected by financial and emotional abuse. We'll need experts in psychology, finance, and family counseling." He placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "And I want an art therapy program. Sometimes, the best healing doesn't come from words." Tommy looked up at his father, a small smile breaking through his worry. "Could I help? Maybe my drawings could help other kids not feel so scared?" "That's a wonderful idea," a weak voice said from the bed. Catherine's eyes were open, still unfocused but aware. Tommy rushed to her side, careful of the IV lines. "Mum, you're awake." Alexander moved closer, his heart pounding. Catherine's gaze met his, and in that moment they shared an understanding that transcended their past conflicts. This wasn't just about their family anymore. It was about all the families who might face similar predators. Outside the hospital window, the Boston skyline stretched toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, David Reeves, or whatever his real name was, thought he had won. He didn't realize that his actions had set in motion something far bigger than his schemes. In trying to destroy one family, he had inadvertently sparked the creation of a movement that would help countless others find their way back from darkness. 2 weeks had passed since Catherine's awakening in the hospital. The luxurious rehabilitation center in the Berkshires, hand-picked by Alexander's medical team, provided a serene environment for her recovery. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the mountains, their peaceful presence a stark contrast to the turmoil of recent events. Catherine sat in a comfortable armchair, wrapped in a soft cashmere blanket, watching Tommy create another masterpiece at a small art table nearby. The boy's artistic talents had flourished in unexpected ways during their ordeal. His drawings, once simple childhood sketches, had evolved into complex expressions of emotion that caught the attention of the center's art therapist. "He has a gift," Dr. Julia Chen remarked, joining Catherine by the window. "The way he processes trauma through art is remarkable. Have you seen his latest series?" Catherine nodded, her eyes never leaving her son. "The maze drawings, they're beautiful and heartbreaking. He told me they represent the feeling of being lost and then finding your way back home. Children often express what they can't say in words," Dr. Chen replied softly. "Speaking of expression, how are you feeling about tomorrow's session?" Tomorrow would be Catherine's first group therapy session, with other survivors of financial and emotional manipulation. The thought made her stomach clench, but she forced herself to take a deep breath, just as her therapist had taught her. "Nervous," she admitted, "but ready. I keep thinking about all the other women out there going through what I did, feeling ashamed, isolated, afraid to ask for help." A gentle knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Alexander entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing a more casual outfit than his usual business attire, a subtle acknowledgement of this different environment. "Dad," Tommy rushed over, proudly holding up his latest drawing. "Look, what I made. Dr. Chen says it could help other kids." Alexander knelt to examine the artwork, giving it his full attention. The drawing showed a complex labyrinth, but unlike his previous maze drawings, this one had bright points of light throughout, leading to a radiant center. "It's incredible, buddy. Want to tell me about it?" "It's about finding your way when you're scared," Tommy explained, his voice gaining confidence. "See these golden spots? They're like your safe places, and people who help you, like how you came when I called and how we found Mom." Catherine wiped away a tear, touched by her son's interpretation. Alexander caught her eye and they shared a moment of understanding. Their boy had become wise beyond his years, transforming his pain into something beautiful and healing. "Actually," Alexander said, standing and opening his portfolio, "that's partly why I'm here today. The Foundation's legal framework is complete." He pulled out several documents, laying them on a nearby table. "Catherine, I'd like you to be part of the board of directors." She blinked in surprise. "Me? But after everything that happened, my judgment is exactly why we need you," Alexander interrupted gently. "You understand what these women are going through in a way I never could. Your experience, as painful as it was, gives you insight that could help protect others." Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. "He's right, Catherine. Survivor leadership is incredibly powerful in organizations like this." Catherine stood, moving to examine the documents. The Foundation's mission statement caught her eye: empowering survivors of financial and emotional abuse through education, support, and creative healing programs. "We're calling it the Lighthouse Foundation," Alexander explained. "Tommy's art actually inspired the name. The idea of providing light in the darkness, helping people find their way back." "Like my drawing," Tommy exclaimed, rushing to add a lighthouse to his maze artwork. Catherine ran her fingers over the embossed logo, a stylized lighthouse with rays of light forming a protective embrace. "It's perfect," she whispered. "But Alexander, this is extensive. The scope of services, the staff requirements." "Money isn't an issue," Alexander said firmly. "I've already committed a significant portion of my personal fortune to the endowment. But more importantly," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "I want this to be something we build together, as a family, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who needs a light in the darkness." Tommy looked up from his drawing. "Can I help too? Maybe I could teach other kids how to draw their feelings." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at her son's eagerness to help others. The therapists had warned her about possible behavioral issues, trust problems, and emotional withdrawal after their ordeal. Instead, Tommy had somehow found a way to channel his experience into empathy and creativity. "Actually," Dr. Chen interjected, "art therapy is proven to be particularly effective with children who've experienced trauma. Tommy's perspective could be invaluable in developing the Foundation's youth programs." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, the family gathered around the table, examining plans and sharing ideas. Catherine felt strength flowing back into her spirit with every passing moment. The man who had tried to destroy her life had inadvertently set her on a path to helping others, to becoming someone stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. Alexander watched Catherine and Tommy collaborating on ideas for the Foundation's programs, his heart full. In the midst of near tragedy, they had discovered a new purpose, one that would reach far beyond their own healing to touch countless other lives. The light in Tommy's maze drawing seemed to glow brighter, a beacon of hope in a world where too many people lost their way in the dark. 6 months later, the Lighthouse Foundation's inaugural ceremony transformed the grand ballroom of Boston's premier hotel into a haven of hope and new beginnings. Soft lighting created an intimate atmosphere despite the room's size, while Tommy's artwork, professionally framed and displayed, added splashes of color and emotion to the elegant space. Catherine stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she surveyed the crowd. Hundreds of faces looked back at her, survivors, supporters, counselors, and financial experts who had joined their cause. In the front row, Tommy sat between Alexander and Sarah, giving his mother an encouraging thumbs up. "When I first met David Reynolds," Catherine began, her voice steady despite the difficult subject, "I thought I had found someone who understood my desire for financial independence. Instead, I discovered the true meaning of emotional and financial manipulation." She paused, drawing strength from the supportive faces before her. "But this story isn't about him. It's about what happens after the manipulation, after the fear, after you think you've lost everything. It's about discovering that your lowest point can become the foundation for something extraordinary. In the audience, Alexander watched with pride as Catherine commanded the room's attention. Gone was the withdrawn, frightened woman they'd found. In the hospital, in her place stood a powerful advocate, using her experience to light the way for others. The Lighthouse Foundation isn't just about financial recovery, Catherine continued. It's about emotional healing, about rediscovering your strength, about turning trauma into triumph. And sometimes our greatest teachers are the ones we least expect. She gestured toward Tommy, who stood and walked to join her at the podium, carrying his sketchbook. My son's art became a beacon during our darkest times. Through his drawings, he showed me that there's always a way forward, always a path back to light. Today, his art therapy program is helping children across the country express their feelings and find healing through creativity. Tommy opened his sketchbook, holding up his latest piece. A stunning combination of lighthouse imagery and intricate pathways, each leading to a bright center. The audience murmured in appreciation. This is why we've created comprehensive programs that address both the financial and emotional aspects of recovery, Catherine explained. Our team of financial advisors help survivors regain control of their resources, while our counselors and art therapists provide the emotional support needed for true healing. Alexander rose from his seat, joining his family at the podium. The Lighthouse Foundation is more than just a charity, he added. It's a commitment to changing how we think about financial relationships and emotional well-being. Every person deserves to feel secure, supported, and empowered. As if on cue, the screens around the ballroom came to life, showing images of the Foundation's first successes, women attending financial literacy workshops, children expressing themselves through art, families rebuilding their lives with newfound confidence. Today marks not just the official launch of our foundation, Catherine continued, but the beginning of a movement. We're creating a network of support that spans the country, offering hope and practical help to anyone who needs it. Sarah stepped forward, tablet in hand, ready to announce the foundation's initial achievements. In just 6 months of soft launch operations, we've already helped over 300 families. Our hotline has received calls from every state in the country, and thanks to Mr. Pierce's initial endowment and the generous support of our donors, we're expanding our services to include legal aid, emergency housing, and educational scholarships. Tommy tugged at his father's sleeve, whispering something. Alexander smiled and nodded, stepping back to let his son approach the microphone. I just want to say, Tommy began, his young voice clear and confident, that sometimes bad things happen, but they don't have to be the end of your story. They can be the beginning of something amazing. Look at all the people here today. We're like a big family now, helping each other find our way home. The audience burst into applause, many wiping away tears. Catherine wrapped an arm around her son's shoulders, drawing strength from his simple wisdom. Alexander joined them, and for a moment they stood together, not just as a family, but as symbols of resilience and hope. As the ceremony continued, with presentations from counselors and survivors sharing their stories, Catherine looked out at the sea of faces. Each person represented a potential light in someone else's darkness, a beacon of hope in a storm. The foundation they'd built wasn't just an organization, it was a testament to the human spirit's capacity to transform pain into purpose. The sun began to set outside the ballroom's windows, but inside the light of hope burned brighter than ever. In the back of the room, new arrivals were still trickling in, drawn by the promise of understanding and support. Each one would find their own path to healing, guided by the lighthouse they had built together. 1 year after the Lighthouse Foundation's launch, Alexander sat in his newly redesigned office, the wall of windows now adorned with framed pieces of Tommy's art. The morning sun illuminated the latest edition, a powerful piece showing a group of people holding lanterns, their combined light pushing back the darkness. His phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. Emergency meeting needed. New case, this one's different. Within an hour, the Foundation's core team gathered in the conference room. Catherine, now the executive director, stood at the head of the table, her professional demeanor a far cry from the vulnerable woman of a year ago. Sarah managed operations beside her, while Dr. Chen led the psychological support programs. Tommy's art therapy program though he was too young to attend meetings, had become the Foundation's most successful youth initiative. Lisa Martinez. Catherine began, bringing up a photo on the screen. 32, successful tech entrepreneur. Her company's CFO, James Wilson, has been systematically undermining her confidence while attempting to gain control of her company's finances. Alexander leaned forward, his expression grave. Similar pattern to other cases? Yes and no, Sarah interjected, pulling up financial records. Wilson's more sophisticated. He's using corporate structures to hide his manipulation. But Lisa noticed something wasn't right when he started isolating her from her board members. The difference is, Catherine continued, she reached out before he could complete his scheme. Our education programs are working. People are recognizing the signs earlier. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. Prevention is always better than a recovery. How did she find us? Through Tommy's art, actually, Catherine smiled. Her daughter attended one of our school workshops. When she came home talking about safe paths and bright spaces, Lisa recognized her own situation in our educational materials. Alexander felt a surge of pride. His son's simple drawings had evolved into a powerful tool for awareness and healing. The Foundation had incorporated Tommy's maze imagery into their educational programs, helping people visualize their journey from manipulation to empowerment. We need to act fast, Sarah said, pulling up more documents. Wilson has called an emergency board meeting for next week. We believe he's planning to present fabricated evidence of financial mismanagement. Not on our watch, Alexander stated firmly. He turned to Catherine. What do you need? Catherine's eyes sparkled with determination. I want to do more than just stop him. This is our chance to create systemic change. If we can expose this type of corporate manipulation, we can protect countless other entrepreneurs. The team spent hours developing a comprehensive plan. Financial experts would audit the company's books, while the Foundation's legal team prepared documentation. But the most powerful weapon in their arsenal was something uniquely their own: the stories of survivors who had rebuilt their lives. Lisa's agreed to speak at next month's conference, Catherine announced. Her story could help other business owners recognize similar patterns. And she paused, a slight smile playing on her lips. Tommy's already working on a special piece for the presentation. As if on cue, Alexander's phone lit up with a photo from his son, a preview of his latest artwork. The image showed a complex corporate maze, but unlike his earlier pieces, this one included multiple people working together, their combined efforts illuminating the path forward. You know, Dr. Chen mused, studying the image, Tommy's art has become more than just therapy. It's a visual language for understanding manipulation and recovery. We're seeing other children adopt similar imagery in their healing process. Alexander remembered the frightened boy who had called him that fateful day, hungry and alone. Now Tommy's pain had transformed into a gift that helped others find their way out of darkness. The Foundation had become more than just a support organization. It was a movement changing how society understood and addressed emotional and financial abuse. There's something else, Sarah added, pulling up a new set of statistics. Our early intervention program has prevented over 50 cases of financial manipulation in the past quarter alone. People are learning to trust their instincts, to reach out before the situation becomes critical. Catherine walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. When I was trapped in my own maze, I never imagined I'd be helping others find their way out. But now, she turned back to the team, her voice strong. Now I understand that sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest opportunities to create change. Alexander joined her at the window, remembering the day everything changed. Tommy asked me once if we could help other kids not feel scared like he did. I don't think any of us realized just how far that simple wish would take us. The morning sun caught the edges of Tommy's framed artwork, making the golden paths seem to glow. In the conference room behind them, the team continued planning their response to Lisa's case, each person contributing their unique expertise to the solution. This was how real change happened, Alexander realized, not through grand gestures or single actions, but through the combined efforts of people who understood the importance of lighting the way for others. The Lighthouse Foundation had become exactly what its name suggested, a beacon of hope in a world where too many people lost their way in the dark. The annual Lighthouse Foundation Youth Art Exhibition transformed the modern gallery space into a kaleidoscope of emotion and healing. Hundreds of pieces created by young artists affected by financial and emotional manipulation lined the walls, each telling its own story of resilience and recovery. Tommy, now 9 years old, stood proudly beside his latest installation, a series of interconnected maze drawings that visitors could walk through, experiencing the journey from isolation to community. Interactive lights responded to movement, illuminating different paths as people explored the space. "Can you explain your inspiration?" a young reporter asked, her recorder held carefully as she interviewed the Foundation's youngest artist. Tommy considered the question with a maturity that still surprised Alexander, watching from nearby. "When bad things happen, it's like being lost in a maze," his son explained. "But I learned that you're never really alone. There are always people willing to help, like lights in the darkness. I wanted to show other kids that finding your way back isn't about doing it by yourself. It's about connecting with others who understand." The reporter smiled, clearly moved. "And these golden threads running through all the pieces? Those represent the stories we share," Tommy said, touching one of the metallic lines that connected his drawings. "Every time someone tells their story, it helps light the way for someone else, like a lighthouse." Across the gallery, Catherine was leading a group of corporate sponsors through the exhibition. Her confident voice carried clearly as she explained the Foundation's latest initiatives. Art therapy isn't just about expression, it's about understanding. These pieces help us identify patterns of manipulation early, preventing years of trauma. Lisa Martinez, the tech entrepreneur they'd helped months earlier, stood with her daughter beside one of the collaborative pieces. The young girl had contributed to a massive mural that showed a city at night, with lighthouses appearing in unexpected places, office buildings, schools, homes. "After what happened at my company," Lisa told a group of interested patrons, "I realized how important it is to create safe spaces everywhere. The Foundation didn't just help me retain control of my company, they helped me understand how to make my workplace safer for everyone." Alexander moved through the crowd, listening to snippets of conversation. The Foundation's impact had grown beyond anything they'd initially imagined. Corporate leaders discussed implementing early warning systems in their organizations. Education. Administrators explored incorporating art therapy programs in their schools. Financial institutions examined their policies for signs of potential manipulation. Dr. Chen appeared at his side, beaming with pride. "The healing ripples out," she said softly. "Every child who finds their voice through art helps another child feel less alone. Every parent who recognizes the signs helps another family avoid trauma." "Dad," Tommy called out, waving him over to a new group of visitors. "These people came all the way from Europe. They want to start something like the Foundation in their countries." The international delegates gathered around Tommy's installation, taking notes and photos. The Foundation's model of combining financial protection with emotional healing had caught the attention of organizations worldwide. Sarah, ever efficient, was already discussing logistics with the European representatives. "We've developed comprehensive training programs," she explained. "Everything from identifying manipulation patterns to implementing art therapy workshops. We can help you establish similar programs in your communities." Catherine joined them, her eyes bright with excitement. "Think about it, Alexander. Lighthouse beacons across the globe, all working together to prevent financial and emotional abuse." Alexander watched as Tommy led the international visitors through his maze installation, explaining how the interactive lights worked. His son's traumatic experience had sparked something extraordinary, a movement that was spreading hope and healing across borders and cultures. "You know what's remarkable?" Dr. Chen observed, watching the scene. "A year ago, most of these kids couldn't talk about their experiences. Now look at them. They're not just surviving, they're helping others thrive." She was right. Throughout the gallery, young artists proudly explained their work to visitors. Their pieces told stories of darkness and light, of losing and finding their way, of transformation and hope. But most importantly, they told stories of connection, of reaching out and finding others who understood. A small commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A new family had arrived, looking uncertain and overwhelmed. Alexander recognized the signs. They were at the beginning of their journey, still finding their way out of the maze. Without hesitation, Tommy approached them, his warm smile welcoming. "Would you like to see my installation?" he asked the young girl who clung to her mother's hand. "It's about finding your way when things seem scary." As Tommy led the family through his interactive maze, explaining how the lights worked and sharing his own story, Alexander saw the tension in their shoulders begin to ease. This was the true power of what they'd created. Not just a foundation or a program, but a community where healing could begin. The evening sun slanted through, the gallery's windows making the golden threads in Tommy's installation shimmer. Visitors moved through the space, connecting with each other and the art around them. In every corner, stories were being shared, understanding was growing, and hope was taking root. This was more than an art exhibition. It was a testament to the human spirit's capacity for transformation. Each piece on the walls, each story shared, each connection made was another light in the darkness, another beacon showing the way home. 18 months after the Foundation's launch, Catherine stood in front of her office mirror, adjusting her blazer before her biggest presentation yet. The United Nations Conference on Financial Empowerment had invited her to be their keynote speaker, recognizing the Lighthouse Foundation's groundbreaking approach to preventing financial abuse. Her phone chimed with a message from Tommy. "Made something special for your speech, Mom. Dad's helping me set it up in the conference room." Attached was a photo of his latest artwork, a stunning digital installation that combined his signature, maze imagery, with real-time data visualization of the Foundation's global impact. "You ready?" Alexander appeared in her doorway, looking proudly at his ex-wife. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had expected, a powerful partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "Almost," Catherine replied, picking up a small sketchbook from her desk. "Tommy's first maze drawing. I always carry it with me before important presentations. Reminds me why we started this journey." They walked together through the Foundation's headquarters, now occupying 3 floors of a downtown Boston building. The space hummed with activity, counselors conducting virtual sessions, financial advisors reviewing cases, art therapists preparing for group workshops. Sarah met them by the elevators, tablet in hand. "The conference center is packed. We've got representatives from 47 countries, plus major financial institutions and tech companies. And," she paused, smiling, "the educational curriculum you developed with Dr. Chen has been approved for implementation in public schools across 5 states. The elevator doors opened to reveal Dr. Chen herself, looking excited. "Catherine, you need to see this before your speech." She led them to the conference room where Tommy's installation was being set up. "We've been analyzing the data from our prevention programs. The early intervention success rate has increased by 300% since implementing Tommy's visual awareness tools." The conference room had been transformed by Tommy's creation. Interactive walls displayed flowing patterns of light that responded to touch, while real-time data streams showed the Foundation's growing impact. Number of families helped, abuse cases prevented, financial resources protected. "Dad helped with the technical stuff," Tommy explained, making final adjustments to the display. "But I wanted to show how everything's connected, how helping one person creates ripples that help others." Catherine hugged her son, careful not to wrinkle her suit. "It's perfect, sweetheart. This is exactly what I wanted to show the UN delegates, that addressing financial abuse requires more than just legal frameworks. It needs heart." Alexander checked his watch. "We should head to the conference center. The Secretary General's opening remarks are in an hour." As they rode to the venue in the Foundation's car, Catherine reviewed her speech notes. The past 18 months had transformed her from a victim to a recognized expert in preventing financial abuse. But more importantly, they had shown her the power of turning personal pain into collective healing. "Remember when you first found me?" she asked Alexander quietly. "I was so ashamed, so broken. I thought I'd lost everything, my confidence, my independence, my ability to protect our son." Alexander took her hand, squeezing it gently. "And now look at you. You're not just surviving, you're changing the world." Tommy, who had been focused on his tablet, looked up. "Mum, can I show them my new project during your speech? The one about the Global Lighthouse Network?" "Of course," Catherine smiled. "Your art has always been at the heart of our message." The conference center buzzed with energy as they arrived. Delegates from around the world filled the auditorium, many already familiar with the Lighthouse Foundation's work. Tommy's art installations had been reproduced in healing centers across the globe, his simple yet powerful imagery transcending language barriers. Sarah efficiently coordinated with the technical team, ensuring Tommy's installation would synchronize perfectly with Catherine's presentation. Dr. Chen arranged last-minute meetings with education ministers interested in implementing the Foundation's programs in their countries. As Catherine prepared to take the stage, she felt a familiar touch on her arm. Alexander stood there, holding out a small gift box. "Tommy and I wanted you to have this today." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a lighthouse pendant. When she turned it over, she found tiny words engraved on the back. "Every light shows another the way." "It's from all of us who found our way back because of you," Tommy explained, his young face serious. "Now you can help light the way for people everywhere." Catherine fastened the necklace with trembling fingers, touching the pendant for strength. Through the stage curtains, she could hear the Secretary General introducing her, describing the Lighthouse Foundation's revolutionary approach to combating financial abuse. "Ready to change the world?" Alexander asked softly. Catherine looked at her family, her brilliant, compassionate son, her ex-husband turned strongest ally, their dedicated team of world changers. She thought of all the lives they'd touched, all the people they'd helped find their way back to light. "I've been ready since the day Tommy made his first maze," she replied, stepping toward the stage. "Sometimes the darkest moments lead us to our brightest purpose." The audience applauded as Catherine took the podium, Tommy's interactive installation coming to life behind her. As she began to speak, the walls of the auditorium filled with flowing light patterns, telling their story of transformation, hope, and the power of turning pain into purpose. The private garden of the Lighthouse Foundation's new international headquarters bloomed with early spring flowers, creating a peaceful haven in the heart of the city. Tommy, surrounded by art supplies, worked intently on his latest piece while Alexander watched from a nearby bench, taking a rare moment of quiet reflection. "Dad," Tommy called out, holding up his sketch, "what do you think? It's for the new children's wing of the foundation." Alexander moved closer to examine the drawing. Over the past 2 years, he had watched his son's artistic talent evolve from simple maze patterns into sophisticated works that combined hope and healing in unique ways. This latest piece showed a group of children working together to build a lighthouse, each one contributing something different: tools, materials, light, and love. "It's beautiful, buddy," Alexander replied, noting how Tommy had incorporated elements from different cultures into the children's appearances. "You're really thinking globally now, aren't you?" Tommy nodded earnestly. "Dr. Chen says art helps people feel less alone no matter where they're from, and Mom's UN speech showed me how many people need our help around the world." Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's arrival. "Mr. Pierce, the board meeting is about to start, and Tommy, your mother's video calling from Singapore. She wants to show you the new art therapy center they're opening there." The Foundation's main conference room had been designed with Tommy's input, featuring walls that could transform into interactive displays. Today, they showed a real-time map of Lighthouse Foundation centers worldwide, each one marked by a glowing point of light. Catherine's face appeared on the main screen, her eyes bright despite the visible fatigue of international travel. Behind her, a group of children worked with art therapists, creating their own versions of Tommy's healing mazes. "Tommy, look!" She adjusted her camera to show more of the Singapore Center. "They've adapted your lighthouse concept into traditional Asian art forms. The children here are creating the most amazing combinations of your techniques with their cultural traditions." Alexander watched his son's face light up as he saw how his art had inspired others. The Foundation's expansion into Asia had been Catherine's project for the past 6 months, working with local organizations to adapt their programs to different cultural contexts. The board members began filing in, each bringing updates from their respective areas. Dr. Chen's research team had documented unprecedented success rates in their prevention programs. The legal department had helped draft new international guidelines for identifying and preventing financial abuse. The education division was launching programs in universities worldwide. "Before we begin," Alexander announced, "I'd like to share something special." He nodded to Tommy, who unveiled his new artwork. "This piece will be the centerpiece of our new children's wing, representing everything the Foundation stands for: hope, healing, and the power of working together." The board members gathered around Tommy's drawing, their expressions softening as they took in its message. These weren't just corporate executives anymore. They were part of something larger, a movement that had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. "You know," Catherine said from the screen, her voice thoughtful, "when we started this foundation, we thought we were building a lighthouse. But what we've really built is a network of lighthouses, each one helping others find their way." Tommy had moved to the interactive wall, adding glowing points to the map. "Look, Mom, your new center makes 300 worldwide." Alexander felt a profound sense of pride, not in the numbers or the global reach, but in the transformation he'd witnessed in his own family. Catherine had evolved from a victim into a powerful advocate for change. Tommy had turned his trauma into a gift that helped others heal. And he himself had learned that true success wasn't measured in dollars, but in lives touched and hearts healed. "Mr. Pierce," Sarah interrupted gently, "the First Lady's office called. They want to partner with the Foundation for a national education initiative on financial empowerment." Tommy looked up from his drawing. "Dad, does this mean we can help?" "Even more people." "It does, buddy," Alexander replied, watching as his son immediately began sketching ideas for the new project. "But you know what's really amazing? It all started with one brave phone call from a little boy who refused to stay lost in the dark." Catherine smiled from the screen, touching her lighthouse pendant. "And now that little boy is helping light the way for children around the world." The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the golden threads in Tommy's artwork and making them shine. Outside, the garden continued to bloom, a reminder that even after the darkest winters, new life and hope would always emerge. As the board meeting began, Alexander looked around the room, at his son's art bringing hope to countless others, at Catherine's determined face on the screen as she built bridges across cultures, at the dedicated team that had become like family. They had created something extraordinary together, transforming their own pain into a force for global change. The Foundation had become more than a safe haven. It was a beacon of transformation, showing that the journey from darkness to light was not just possible, but could illuminate the path for others. And at its heart was a family that had learned the most powerful lesson of all, that sometimes the greatest light comes from helping others find their way home. The Harvard Business School auditorium buzzed with anticipation as students filled every seat. Today's guest lecture wasn't just any presentation. It was the first time Catherine and Tommy would share the stage, telling their story to future business leaders as part of the school's new Ethics and Emotional Intelligence in Business curriculum. Tommy, now 10, adjusted his tablet nervously backstage. His latest digital art installation, specifically designed for this presentation, waited to transform the auditorium's screens. Catherine watched her son with pride, remembering the frightened 8-year-old who had once hidden his feelings in May's drawings. "Remember," she said softly, "just tell it like you see it. Your perspective matters." Alexander joined them, having just finished a pre-lecture meeting with the dean. The waiting list for this lecture series is unprecedented. They've had to add satellite locations in 3 other universities. Sarah appeared with last-minute updates. Live streaming is set up in business schools across 6 countries. Dr. Chen's research team is ready to gather data on how your story impacts future business practices. The dean stepped onto the stage to introduce them, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. Today's speakers represent a revolutionary approach to business ethics and social responsibility. The Lighthouse Foundation hasn't just created a support system, They've transformed how we understand the intersection of financial and emotional intelligence in leadership. As Catherine and Tommy walked onto the stage, the screens came alive with Tommy's installation. The traditional academic setting morphed into an immersive experience, with gentle waves of light flowing across the walls and interactive elements responding to their movements. 3 years ago, Catherine began, her voice steady, I was trapped in a maze of financial and emotional manipulation. Today I'm here to share how that experience led to a global movement for change. She touched her lighthouse pendant, drawing strength from its familiar presence. Tommy stepped forward, his young voice clear and confident. I was 8 when I made my first maze drawing. I didn't know then that it would help other kids find their way out of scary situations. I just knew I needed to show how it felt to be lost, and then found. The audience leaned forward as Tommy demonstrated how his art had evolved into a therapeutic tool. The screens displayed his journey from simple pencil mazes to complex digital installations that helped people understand and process their experiences. What we've learned, Catherine continued, is that financial abuse isn't just about money. It's about power, control, and the exploitation of trust. As future business leaders, you have the responsibility to recognize and prevent these patterns in your organizations. The presentation shifted to show real case studies, success stories from the Foundation's work around the world. A CEO who had implemented early warning systems in her multinational corporation. A bank that had revolutionized its approach to detecting financial abuse. A tech startup that had integrated emotional intelligence training into its core operations. But the most important lesson, Tommy added, bringing up his latest artwork, is that helping others find their way makes your own path clearer. Every person we help becomes a new light for someone else. During the Q&A session, a student raised her hand. How do you balance the emotional aspect of your work with the practical business challenges? Catherine smiled, glancing at her son. Tommy taught me that they're not separate things. Good business isn't just about profits. It's about understanding and caring for the human beings involved in every transaction. Another student asked Tommy directly, what would you tell other kids who feel lost like you did? Tommy considered the question carefully. I'd tell them that their feelings matter, that art or whatever way they express themselves can help others understand, and that there are always people willing to help. Sometimes they're just waiting for a signal to know you need them. As the lecture continued, Alexander watched from the wings, marveling at how his family had transformed their pain into purpose. The frightened boy who had called him that desperate day was now a poised young advocate, using his art to change how the world understood emotional and financial abuse. The Foundation's approach had sparked a revolution in business education. Universities worldwide were incorporating their insights into their curricula, recognizing that the next generation of leaders needed more than just financial acumen. They needed emotional intelligence and ethical awareness. Sarah showed Alexander the latest metrics on her tablet. The lecture was trending globally, with business leaders and educators sharing insights across social media. The Foundation's message was reaching beyond their traditional audience, influencing how future corporations would approach financial ethics and emotional responsibility. Tommy's installation shifted to show the Foundation's global impact. Hundreds of points of light representing centers, programs, and lives changed. But more than the numbers, it showed the connections between these points, illustrating how each person helped became a helper themselves. We call it the lighthouse effect, Catherine explained to the audience. When one person finds their way out of darkness, they often become the light that guides others. It's not just about helping people escape abuse, it's about transforming survivors into leaders. As the lecture drew to a close, Tommy unveiled his newest project, a collaborative digital platform that would allow children worldwide to create and share their own healing art. The audience burst into applause, understanding they were witnessing not just a presentation, but a glimpse into the future of ethical business leadership. Catherine wrapped an arm around her son's shoulders as they received a standing ovation. In the front row, Dr. Chen beamed proudly. Her research had proven that the Foundation's approach wasn't just emotionally powerful, it was scientifically sound. In the Foundation's rooftop garden, strung with soft lights and filled with the gentle sound of flowing water, a special celebration was underway. It wasn't just any gathering, it was the evening of Tommy's first solo art exhibition, Pathways to Light, a journey of healing. The space had been transformed by Tommy's latest installations, combining traditional artwork with interactive digital elements. Maze patterns flowed from canvas to screens, responding to visitors' movements and emotions. Each piece told part of a larger story, not just of his family's journey, but of the countless lives touched by the Foundation. Alexander stood with Catherine watching their son guide a group of young artists through the exhibition. These children, all participants in the Foundation's programs, had contributed their own artwork to a special collaborative section of the show. "Remember when he could barely talk about his feelings?" Catherine whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Now look at him, helping others find their voice through art." Tommy had grown into his role as the Foundation's young ambassador, with remarkable grace. His artwork had evolved from simple maze drawings into sophisticated pieces that combined traditional media with cutting-edge technology, all while maintaining the pure emotional honesty that had made his early work so powerful. "Ms. Pierce?" A small girl, no more than 7, approached Catherine shyly. "Tommy showed us how to make maze art in our therapy group. I made this for you." She held out a carefully folded paper, which opened to reveal a colorful labyrinth with tiny lighthouses guiding the way. Catherine knelt to accept the gift, recognizing the healing symbolism in the child's artwork. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Would you like to tell me about it?" As the girl explained her drawing, Sarah approached with exciting news. The education initiative has been approved in all 50 states. Starting next semester, every public school will have access to our art therapy programs and financial literacy curriculum. Dr. Chen joined them, her face glowing with pride. And the research results are extraordinary. Schools that implemented our pilot program showed a 70% increase in emotional awareness and a 65% decrease in reported bullying incidents. Tommy's voice carried across the garden as he explained his centerpiece installation to a group of interested patrons. The piece combined physical sculpture with dynamic digital elements, creating a metaphorical journey from isolation to community. Visitors could interact with the installation, their movements adding new layers of light and color to the display. "The maze isn't just about being lost anymore," he explained, sounding older than his years. "It's about how we find each other, how every person who heals becomes part of the path for someone else." Alexander watched as business leaders, educators, and art critics engaged with his son's work, recognizing the profound impact of his simple yet powerful message. The Foundation had grown beyond their wildest dreams, but at its heart remained the pure intention of a child wanting to help others feel less alone. "Mr. Pierce," a familiar voice drew his attention. Lisa Martinez, the tech entrepreneur they'd helped years ago, stood nearby with her daughter. "We've just launched the app we developed based on Tommy's art therapy techniques. 10,000 downloads in the first week." The app was another extension of the Foundation's reach, bringing therapeutic art tools to people who might not have access to traditional support services. Tommy had worked closely with the development team, ensuring the digital experience maintained the emotional authenticity of his original artwork. As the evening progressed, more stories emerged. A teacher shared how Tommy's art techniques had helped her students process difficult emotions. A corporate executive described how the Foundation's programs had transformed his company's culture. Parents spoke of children finding their voice through art. Catherine gathered everyone's attention for a special announcement. "Tonight isn't just about celebrating art, it's about celebrating transformation. Every piece in this exhibition represents a step on the journey from darkness to light, from isolation to community." Tommy stepped forward, suddenly looking both young and wise. "When I started drawing mazes, I was trying to understand my own feelings, but now I understand that art isn't just about expressing yourself. It's about connecting with others who know how you feel." He gestured to the collaborative wall where dozens of artworks created by children in the Foundation's programs hung together, forming a larger image of a lighthouse. "Every story matters. Every path counts. And sometimes, the light we're looking for comes from helping others find their way. The evening ended with an unexpected surprise. The National Arts Education Association announced a new annual award in Tommy's name, recognizing young artists who use their creativity to promote healing and social change. As the last guests departed, Tommy stood with his parents in the peaceful garden, surrounded by the gentle glow of his installations. The city lights sparkled below, each one reminiscent of the countless beacons they'd helped light around the world. "You know what I've learned?" Tommy said softly, looking at his artwork. "Sometimes the scariest mazes lead to the most beautiful destinations. We just have to be brave enough to take the first step and kind enough to help others take theirs." Alexander and Catherine exchanged glances, remembering the desperate phone call that had started their journey. Their family's darkest moment had become a source of light for countless others, proving that even the deepest wounds could transform into gifts of healing. The garden's lights reflected off Tommy's latest installation, creating patterns that danced across the walls like stars finding their way home. In this peaceful moment, surrounded by the evidence of art's power to heal, they understood that their journey had only just begun. There were still so many paths to light, so many stories to tell, so many hearts to help find their way back home. The White House rose garden glowed in the late afternoon sun as Catherine adjusted her blazer one final time. In just moments, she would join the First Lady to announce a groundbreaking national initiative, combining the Lighthouse Foundation's programs with federal resources to combat financial abuse across America. Tommy sat nearby, tablet in hand, putting the finishing touches on the interactive presentation they'd developed for the announcement. At 10 years old, he had become remarkably poised in these high-profile situations, though Alexander could still see traces of nervous energy in the way he fiddled with his stylus. "Everything ready, buddy?" Alexander asked, sitting beside his son. "Almost," Tommy replied, making one final adjustment to the animation sequence. "I wanted to add something special for today." He turned the tablet to show his father a new element. In the design, a pattern of interconnected lighthouses that, when viewed together, formed the shape of the American flag. Sarah approached with their final briefing notes. "The press room is full. We've got representatives from every major network, plus streaming services and international media. Dr. Chen just arrived with the latest impact statistics." Dr. Chen joined them, her usual calm demeanor brightened by excitement. "The preliminary results from our pilot programs in 5 states are extraordinary. Financial abuse reporting has increased by 200%, while successful interventions have prevented an estimated 500 million in potential losses. But more importantly," she added, smiling at Tommy, "the emotional recovery rates in children's programs have exceeded all expectations." The First Lady's Chief of Staff appeared, signaling it was time. As they walked through the historic hallways, Catherine reflected on their journey. 3 years ago, she had been trapped in a maze of manipulation and fear. Now she was about to help implement the most comprehensive financial abuse prevention program in the nation's history. The Rose Garden was filled with dignitaries, advocates, and survivors. Among them sat Lisa Martinez, whose tech company had become a key partner in developing digital tools for abuse prevention. Near her were other survivors who had transformed their experiences into advocacy, each one a beacon of hope for others still finding their way. The First Lady stepped to the podium first, her words carrying across the hushed garden. "Today we're not just announcing a program, we're launching a revolution in how we protect Americans from financial abuse. The Lighthouse Initiative. We'll bring together the innovative approaches of the Lighthouse Foundation with the reach and resources of the federal government." As Catherine took her place at the podium, Tommy's presentation came to life on the screens behind her. The interactive display showed the planned nationwide network of support centers, each one represented by a glowing point of light. "Financial abuse thrives in isolation," Catherine began, her voice strong and clear. "It flourishes in darkness, but today we're building a network of light so vast and interconnected that no one need ever face these challenges alone." Tommy's animation shifted, showing how the Foundation's programs would be integrated into existing social services, creating a comprehensive safety net. The artistic elements made complex data accessible and emotionally resonant, helping viewers understand not just the statistics, but the human stories behind them. This initiative, Catherine continued, will establish lighthouse centers in every state, implement our prevention curriculum in schools nationwide, and create rapid response teams to intervene in crisis situations. But perhaps most importantly, it will change how we talk about financial abuse, transforming it from a hidden shame to a challenge we face together as a community. The First Lady returned to the podium to announce the initiative's funding, a combination of federal resources and private sector partnerships that would ensure sustainability and reach. Alexander, watching from the side, felt a surge of pride as Tommy was invited to explain the youth programs that would be implemented in schools across the country. "When I first started drawing mazes," Tommy said, his young voice carrying surprising authority, "I was trying to understand my own feelings. Now, through our art therapy programs, we help other kids do the same thing. But we also teach them about healthy relationships with money, about trust, and about asking for help when they need it." The screens shifted to show examples from the Foundation's youth programs. Children's artwork transformed into powerful tools for emotional expression and healing. The audience murmured appreciatively as Tommy demonstrated how traditional art therapy techniques had been enhanced with digital technology to reach more young people. Dr. Chen presented the research backing their approach, explaining how the Foundation's programs had revolutionized the understanding of financial abuse recovery. "We're not just treating symptoms," she explained. "We're changing patterns of behavior that have persisted for generations." As the presentation concluded, Catherine unveiled the initiative's most ambitious element, a nationwide early warning system that would help identify potential abuse situations before they escalated. The system, built on artificial intelligence and human insight, would work through banks, schools, and community organizations to spot warning signs and trigger appropriate interventions. "3 years ago," Catherine said, her voice softening, "with emotion, my son's courage in reaching out for help changed not just our lives but the lives of countless others. Today we're ensuring that every person who needs help will find it, not just through one lighthouse, but through a constellation of support that spans our entire nation." The afternoon sun caught the crystal lighthouse pin the First Lady had given Catherine, sending prisms of light dancing across the podium. In that moment, surrounded by people dedicated to creating change, the simple truth of their mission seemed to shimmer in the air. Sometimes the darkest experiences could lead to the brightest possibilities for helping others. The grand ballroom of the Lighthouse Foundation's international headquarters sparkled with celebration as hundreds of guests gathered for a milestone event. 5 years had passed since that desperate phone call that started everything, and the Foundation was hosting a special anniversary gala to honor the transformations that had occurred since then. Tommy, now entering his teenage years, stood before his latest installation, a massive interactive wall that told the Foundation's story through art, light, and emotion. The piece combined physical artwork with cutting-edge technology, allowing visitors to explore the journey from isolation to community through their own movement and interaction. "Each light represents a person who found their way back," he explained to a group of interested visitors. "And when you touch one, you can see all the other lives they helped change." As if to demonstrate, he placed his hand on one glowing point, causing a cascade of light to ripple across the installation, showing the interconnected web of healing and hope that had grown from each intervention. Catherine, watching from nearby, felt her heart swell with pride. Her son had grown from a frightened child into a poised young advocate, using his artistic gifts to help others understand and heal from trauma. The maze patterns that once expressed his fear now guided others toward hope. Alexander joined them, having just finished a meeting with international partners. "The European Union has officially adopted our prevention protocols," he announced quietly. "Every bank in the EU will now use our early warning system to identify potential abuse situations." Sarah appeared with more updates. The app has reached 5 million downloads worldwide, and Dr. Chen's latest research paper on the effectiveness of our art therapy programs has been accepted by the World Health Organization as a global best practice. The gala's guests represented a cross-section of the foundation's impact: survivors who had become advocates, business leaders who had implemented protection programs, educators who had brought the curriculum to their schools, and children who had found their voice through art therapy. Lisa Martinez, whose tech company had become a crucial partner, was demonstrating the latest version of their prevention software to a group of international bankers. The AI can now identify subtle patterns of financial manipulation across multiple accounts and institutions, she explained. But more importantly, it connects potential victims with human support immediately. Dr. Chen had set up a special display showcasing the scientific validation of their approach. 5 years of data prove that combining financial protection with emotional support creates lasting change, she told interested visitors. We're not just preventing abuse, we're breaking intergenerational cycles of financial trauma. As the evening progressed, Tommy unveiled the centerpiece of his installation, an interactive experience that allowed visitors to contribute their own light to the growing network. Everyone has a story, he explained, and when we share our stories, we help light the way for others. Catherine took the stage for the evening's keynote address, touching her lighthouse pendant for strength. 5 years ago, I was lost in a maze of manipulation and fear. Today, we stand in a room full of light. Not just the physical light around us, but the light of transformation, of healing, of hope. The screens behind her came alive with Tommy's artwork, showing the foundation's growth from a single office to a global network of support. We've helped prevent over $10 billion in financial abuse, she continued. But the real measure of our success isn't in dollars. It's in the lives transformed, the families restored, the communities strengthened. Alexander joined her on stage, and Tommy completed the family triangle. Together they represented not just a success story, but a new model of healing, one that recognized the deep connection between financial and emotional well-being. Looking forward, Catherine announced, we're launching our most ambitious project yet. The Lighthouse Academy will train the next generation of advocates, combining financial expertise with emotional intelligence and artistic expression. We're not just solving today's problems, we're preparing tomorrow's leaders to create lasting change. Tommy stepped forward to demonstrate the Academy's innovative curriculum through his art. The installation transformed to show how traditional financial education would be enhanced with emotional awareness training and creative expression. Because sometimes, he explained, his young voice carrying wisdom beyond his years, the best way to understand something is to see it differently. Art helps us do that. It helps us turn our experiences, even the painful ones, into bridges that connect us with others. As the evening drew to a close, guests were invited to add their own lights to Tommy's installation. One by one, they approached the wall, each touch creating new connections in the glowing network. The combined effect was breathtaking, hundreds of individual lights joining together to push back the darkness. Catherine, Alexander, and Tommy stood together, watching the spontaneous display of unity and hope. 5 years ago, they had been broken pieces of a fractured family. Now they stood as architects of transformation, their personal healing multiplied countless times through the lives they'd touched. You know what I've learned, Tommy said softly, watching the lights dance across his installation. Sometimes, the hardest paths lead to the most important destinations, and when we help others find their way, we make the whole world a little brighter. The gala continued into the night, but the real celebration was in the quiet moments, in the conversations between survivors sharing their stories, in the children proudly showing their artwork, in the professionals implementing new protection systems, and in the endless possibilities that opened up when people chose to transform their pain into purpose. The pristine auditorium of the newly inaugurated Lighthouse Academy buzzed with anticipation. It was orientation day, and the first class of students, a diverse group of survivors, advocates, financial experts, and artists, filled the seats. At the center of the stage stood a remarkable piece of interactive art, Tommy's latest creation, designed specifically for this momentous occasion. Catherine adjusted her presentation notes at the podium, watching as Tommy, now 13, made final adjustments to his installation. The piece seemed to breathe with light, responding to the energy in the room. It was hard to believe that this confident young artist had once been that frightened child calling for help. "Ready?" Alexander asked, joining them on stage. As the Foundation's chairman, he would officially open the academy, but everyone knew the real stars of the day were Catherine and Tommy, the mother and son whose journey had inspired this revolutionary educational initiative. Sarah orchestrated the technical preparations with her usual efficiency. Live streaming is connected to our satellite campuses in London, Tokyo, and Sydney. Dr. Chen's research team is ready to document this first cohort's journey. The lights dimmed and Tommy's installation came to life, casting a warm glow across the auditorium. The piece combined traditional art with advanced technology, creating an immersive experience that would serve as both inspiration and teaching tool for the Academy students. "Welcome to the Lighthouse Academy," Catherine began, her voice strong and clear. "Each of you is here because you understand that preventing financial abuse requires more than just financial knowledge. It requires emotional intelligence, creative thinking, and the courage to transform personal experience into positive change." The screens behind her displayed statistics about the Foundation's impact over the past 5 years. Thousands of families helped, billions in abuse prevented, hundreds of communities transformed. But more importantly, they showed the human stories behind these numbers, stories of healing, empowerment, and transformation. Tommy stepped forward to explain his installation. "This piece represents our learning philosophy," he said, gesturing to the interactive wall. "See how the lights respond to movement? That's because real change happens when we engage with each other, when we share our stories and experiences." As if to demonstrate, he touched one of the glowing points, causing a cascade of light to flow across the installation. Every person's journey affects others. When we heal, we help others heal. When we learn, we help others learn. Dr. Chen took the stage next, explaining the Academy's unique curriculum. "We're combining traditional financial education with art therapy, emotional intelligence training, and practical advocacy skills. Our graduates won't just understand financial abuse, they'll be equipped to prevent it and help others recover from it." The first class of students represented this integrated approach. Among them sat Lisa Martinez's daughter, now a teenager herself who had been inspired by Tommy's art to pursue both technology and creative therapy. Next to her was a former banking executive who had witnessed financial abuse and wanted to create better prevention systems. "Your first assignment," Catherine announced, "is to share your story through art. It doesn't matter if you've never drawn before. Tommy will show you how art can express things that words sometimes can't." The students moved to the workshop area, where art supplies and digital tablets waited. Tommy began demonstrating his technique for turning personal experiences into visual narratives. His gentle guidance and profound understanding of emotional expression helped even the most hesitant participants find their creative voice. Alexander watched from the side, marveling at how naturally his son had grown into his role as a teacher. The frightened boy who once drew mazes to understand his fear now helped others navigate their own emotional landscapes. "Mr. Pierce," Sarah whispered, showing him her tablet. "The online applications for next semester have doubled since the orientation began streaming. We're getting requests from universities worldwide to partner with the Academy." Catherine joined a group of students working on their pieces, offering encouragement and sharing her own journey. "Remember," she told them, "every story matters. Your experiences, however painful, can become tools for helping others find their way." As the day progressed, the Academy's walls filled with artwork, each piece telling a unique story of survival, hope, and transformation. Tommy's installation responded to each new addition, incorporating elements of the students' work into its flowing patterns of light. "You see," Tommy explained to a particularly moved student, "art isn't just about expressing pain, it's about transforming it into something that helps others. When we share our stories through creativity, we create new paths for healing." Dr. Chen's team documented the day's activities, adding to their growing body of research on the effectiveness of creative expression in healing from financial trauma. "What we're seeing here," she told visiting educators, "is the birth of a new approach to both prevention and recovery. Near the end of the day, Catherine gathered everyone for a final observation. The students' artwork had been digitally integrated into Tommy's installation, creating a powerful visualization of their collective journey. "Look at what you've created together," she said softly. "Each of your stories is unique, but together they form something larger, a network of understanding, support, and hope. This is what the Lighthouse Academy is about, turning individual experiences into collective wisdom that lights the way for others." As the sun set outside, the installation's glow seemed to intensify, reflecting the energy and emotion in the room. The Academy's first class had begun their journey not just as students, but as pioneers in a new approach to healing and prevention. Tommy stood with his parents, watching as the last students added their contributions to the installation. "You know what's amazing?" he said thoughtfully. "Every time someone shares their story, it makes the light stronger. It's like what you always say, Mum. We're not just building lighthouses anymore, we're teaching others how to become beacons themselves." The United Nations General Assembly Hall hummed with anticipation as delegates from around the world gathered for a historic moment. The Lighthouse Foundation's comprehensive approach to preventing financial abuse was about to be adopted as a global standard, marking a transformation in how the world addressed this pervasive issue. Catherine stood at the podium, Tommy and Alexander beside her, as she prepared to present the Foundation's model to the international community. Behind them, a massive version of Tommy's interactive art installation spanned the wall, its gentle waves of light creating an atmosphere of hope and possibility. "6 years ago," Catherine began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall, "my son made a brave phone call that changed not just our lives, but the lives of countless others. Today we're here to ensure that no one, anywhere in the world, has to face financial abuse alone." Tommy stepped forward, his teenage confidence tempered with humility, as he demonstrated how art and technology could work together to identify and prevent abuse. The installation behind him responded to his movements, showing how the Foundation's early warning system had evolved into a sophisticated global network. "Every point of light represents a life changed," he explained, touching the interactive display. "When we connect these points, we create something powerful, a safety net that catches people before they fall too far into darkness." Alexander presented the practical aspects of implementing the Foundation's model globally. "We've proven that combining financial protection with emotional support and creative expression creates lasting change. Now, with the UN's adoption of these protocols, we can extend that protection to vulnerable populations worldwide." Sarah, coordinating the technical aspects of the presentation, signaled as real-time translations reached delegates in their native languages. The Foundation's message of hope and transformation transcended linguistic barriers, touching hearts in every corner of the world. Dr. Chen shared the research, supporting their approach. "Over 6 years of data prove that our integrated model not only prevents abuse, but helps survivors become advocates for change. We are breaking cycles of financial trauma that have persisted for generations." The presentation included video testimonials from people around the world whose lives had been touched by the Foundation. A young artist in Tokyo who had adapted Tommy's maze therapy for traditional Japanese art forms, a banker in Brazil who had implemented the early warning system and prevented countless cases of abuse, a teacher in Kenya who used the Foundation's curriculum to empower her students. Lisa Martinez, now a global technology advisor for the Foundation, demonstrated how their prevention software had evolved. The system now operates in 27 languages, adapting to cultural nuances while maintaining its core protective functions. As the presentation continued, Tommy unveiled his latest innovation, a global art therapy network that would allow survivors worldwide to connect and heal through creative expression. "Art speaks when words fail," he explained. "It helps us understand each other's stories, no matter where we come from." Catherine returned to the podium for the final portion of their presentation. "The Lighthouse model isn't just a program, it's a movement. It recognizes that financial abuse is both a personal and systemic issue, requiring solutions that address both individual trauma and societal patterns." The screens displayed the Foundation's vision for the future, a world where every community had access to protection, support, and healing resources, where financial institutions worked proactively to prevent abuse, where schools taught emotional intelligence alongside financial literacy. But perhaps most importantly, Catherine continued, touching her lighthouse pendant, this model shows us that our darkest experiences can become our greatest tools for helping others. Every survivor who becomes an advocate, every victim who finds their voice adds another light to our global network. Tommy's installation shifted to show the real-time impact of their work. Thousands of points of light connecting across continents, each representing a life touched, a story transformed, a future reclaimed. 6 years ago, Tommy said, his young voice carrying wisdom beyond his years, I drew mazes because I felt lost. Today we're creating pathways that help others find their way home. And with the UN's adoption of the Lighthouse model, those pathways will reach every corner of the world. As the Assembly prepared to vote on the resolution, Alexander watched his family with pride. They had transformed their personal tragedy into a force for global change, proving that the human spirit's capacity for healing and hope knew no bounds. The installation's light seemed to pulse with anticipation as the votes were cast. One by one, nations signaled their support, until finally the resolution passed unanimously. The Lighthouse model would become an international standard, its principles of protection, healing and transformation adopted by countries worldwide. In that moment of triumph, Catherine, Alexander and Tommy stood together, their family's journey coming full circle. The desperate phone call that had once connected a frightened boy with his father had grown into a global network of support, proving that sometimes the smallest lights could illuminate the largest paths to change. On the evening before his 14th birthday, Tommy stood in the private gallery of the Lighthouse Foundation's headquarters, surrounded by a retrospective of his artwork. The exhibition, titled Journey of Light, From Mazes to Movement, chronicled not just his artistic evolution, but the transformation of a family's pain into a global force for change. The first piece in the collection was the simple maze drawing he'd made during those frightening days when his mother disappeared. Now framed in soft light, it seemed to pulse with the raw emotion of that time, fear, confusion, and the desperate hope that someone would help. It feels like a lifetime ago, Catherine said softly, joining her son. She wore her lighthouse pendant, now accompanied by the crystal pin given to her by the First Lady and the United Nations Humanitarian Award medallion. Alexander approached with Dr. Chen, who had been instrumental in documenting the therapeutic impact of Tommy's art. Over the years, your early works are being studied in psychology programs worldwide, she told Tommy. The way you translated emotional trauma into visual language has revolutionized how we understand recovery. Tommy moved through the gallery, explaining the progression of his work to Sarah and other Foundation leaders who had gathered for this private viewing. Each piece told part of their story, from simple pencil mazes to complex digital installations that now helped people around the world find their way out of darkness. This was the turning point, he said, stopping at a piece created during their first year of recovery. The maze pattern had begun to incorporate light, showing paths forward instead of just walls and barriers. I realized that art could do more than express pain. It could help create solutions. The exhibition continued chronologically, showing how Tommy's art had evolved alongside the Foundation's growth. There were pieces from the First Support Center, the Harvard Lecture Series, the White House Initiative, and the United Nations presentation. Each artwork reflected not just artistic maturity, but a deepening understanding of healing and hope. Remember this one? Catherine touched a frame containing a collaborative piece from the Foundation's first youth workshop. This was when we discovered that other children could use your maze technique to process their own experiences. Alexander watched his son move confidently through the gallery, remembering the frightened boy who had called him that desperate day. Tommy had grown into a poised young advocate, using his artistic gifts to help others while maintaining the sensitivity and empathy that made his work so powerful. The most remarkable thing, Dr. Chen observed, is how your art has created a universal language for healing, We've seen your techniques adapted across cultures, helping people who might otherwise never have found their voice. Sarah brought up the latest statistics on her tablet. The art therapy programs based on your work are now active in over 5,000 schools worldwide. The digital version of your maze therapy has been translated into 40 languages. They reached the centerpiece of the exhibition, an immersive installation that combined physical artwork with interactive technology. Visitors could walk through a maze of light and shadow, their movements triggering gentle waves of illumination that revealed new paths and possibilities. This represents everything we've learned, Tommy explained, touching a panel that caused the light patterns to shift. How healing isn't a straight line, how every person's journey affects others, how the light we find in our darkest moments can help illuminate the way for someone else. Lisa Martinez arrived with her daughter, both of them having played crucial roles in developing the Foundation's technological tools. Your art helped us understand how to make our prevention systems more human, Lisa said. It's not just about algorithms anymore. It's about recognizing the emotional patterns that your work first revealed. As evening fell, the gallery took on an ethereal quality, with Tommy's light installations creating an atmosphere of gentle transformation. Catherine gathered everyone for a toast, celebrating not just the exhibition, but the journey it represented. Tomorrow, Tommy turns 14, she began, her voice rich with emotion. The same age I was when I first started struggling with financial confidence, but because of his courage in reaching out that day, because of his gift for turning pain into purpose, countless others now have tools for protection and healing that I never had. Alexander raised his glass. To art that lights the way, he said simply, watching his son with pride. Tommy touched one of his earliest maze drawings, then gestured to his latest installation. You know what I've learned? He said thoughtfully. Every maze has a solution. Sometimes we find it alone, sometimes we need help, but there's always a way forward, and sometimes the path we take to find our way becomes a light for others. The exhibition would open to the public the next day, sharing their story with the world. But this evening belonged to the family and close friends who had been part of their journey from the beginning. Together, they had transformed a single cry for help into a global movement of healing and hope. As night settled over the city, Tommy's installations cast their gentle light across the gallery, creating patterns that seemed to dance with possibility.